Marhaban, my name is Ian Campbell, and this series of 6 videos is the third series in a whole set of videos explaining the basics of how to speak, read, and write Al-Fusha or Modern Standard Arabic. These 6 videos will explore how to create simple sentences. This is much more complicated in Arabic than in English, mostly because Arabic lacks capital letters and helper words like is, or a, or an. This first video will give an overview of sentences and how to distinguish a phrase from a sentence. So let's begin with the word for sentence, which is al-jumla. It has the jim, mim, lam root, which has a lot of words from it, including jamil for beautiful, and jamal for camel, and jamal for beauty. Jumla has ta marbuta at the end, but unlike most words that have ta marbuta, we don't pluralize it by adding alif ta. Rather, we say al-jumal for the plural. Though if you said jumlat, everyone would understand you. Just for reference, a sentence is a complete thought with a topic and information about that thought, whereas an ism sifa or phrase is an incomplete thought. So that's the major difference between the two of them. In this series of videos, we're going to look at what's called the jumla ismiya, or nominal sentence, which is defined in Arabic grammar as a sentence that does not begin with a verb. And this set of lessons will only address the jumla ismiya. We'll save verbs for later, although I'll address them here and there during some of the later videos. The key feature in understanding the difference between a sentence and a phrase is that sentences, nominal sentences, go from definite to indefinite, while phrases stay one or the other. They stay definite or they stay indefinite. Since Arabic lacks these wonderful little helping words like is or a, an, this can be tricky to parse at first. Once you learn it, it's no big deal, but it's definitely a little bit opaque at first. So you want to pay careful attention near the beginning of when you start learning these things so you can always identify a sentence from a phrase. So to give a few examples here, we have at-talib al-jadid. It's very easy to see that both of these words are definite, and so that makes it a phrase. Same thing over here, talib jadid, only they're both indefinite. So since they stay the same, they're both phrases rather than sentences. However, if we say at-talib jadid, we go from definite, here's our alif lam, to indefinite. And that's what tells us that this is a sentence. So this means the student is new. We don't have an is in Arabic. Technically we do, but we don't really use it for most things. So we could say at-talib al-jadid, the student, the new. And if you watched the previous series of videos, we know that this means the new student. Here we have talib jadid. They're both indefinite. So that tells us that this is a new student, and we have to put the a there, which is why it's in brackets up here. However, we go from definite to indefinite here. So what I usually teach students is to put a little vertical line there. And that line is how you know it's a sentence. And this is the student is new. Again, we don't have an is. Again, technically we do. We just don't use it for reasons that are not worth going into here. So the key to fluency here is to look for this point, to try to find a point where the words go from definite to indefinite. If that point exists, it might not, it might just be a very long phrase. That makes it a sentence. And that point, where I've drawn the blue line here, is where the is or am or are is going to go, because Arabic doesn't use those words in typical ordinary sentences. So let's take a look at a couple of examples here. At-taliba al-jadida al-dhakiya, the student, the new, the smart. And of course, new and smart both have ta marbutas because they modify a feminine noun, the student. In English, we don't necessarily know what gender this student is, but in Arabic we do. So all three of these words are definite, and this is really easy to see with the alif lams. In subsequent videos, I'm going to show you a bunch of examples where they don't have alif lams, and it isn't nearly as obvious. But for right now, we're going to stick to the really simple things. So this is a phrase, an ism sifa, not a sentence because it never goes from definite to indefinite. So the student, the new, the smart gives us the smart new student. But here we've got definite, الطالبة, definite, الجديدة, and indefinite, ذكية. So that tells us, because we found this point where we went from definite to indefinite, that this is a sentence, and that here is where the is or am or are is going to go. So I'll draw my little blue line here, and this one means the new student is smart, even though there's no is here. Arabic lacks capital letters, which before I started studying Arabic, I was pretentious enough to write everything in only lowercase. And what Arabic taught me really quickly was that capital letters are marvelous. They help you skim texts. They help you tell the difference between phrases and sentences. Capital letters are great. And then again, I'm putting the word is in brackets here because we don't actually have a word for is. We have to infer that it's there. And then over here we have the new smart student. In English we would put a comma between adjectives, but Arabic lacked punctuation for the overwhelmingly most part up until about the middle of the 19th century, and then only at the turn of the last century was it really standardized. Classical Arabic uses little words in place of punctuation and then doesn't do it here. Classical Arabic is basically one long run-on sentence, which is confusing at first, and then you internalize it. Modern Arabic uses punctuation, but because it's still not always used everywhere, I'm going to give you these example sentences without it. So here we have the period to tell us it's a sentence. Here we have the comma between the adjectives, but in standard Arabic we don't typically use either of these, except in journalism and literature. We certainly don't use the is. A lot of times we will use punctuation now. But the key here is to identify whether there's a point that we go from definite to indefinite, and then the is, am, or are is going to go there. And if you can't find that point, it's not a sentence. It's an ism sifa. It's a phrase. So here's a couple other examples. الطالب الجديد, definite, definite. شاب, indefinite. ذكي, indefinite. So a shab is a young guy, and then here's ذكي is smart. So right here is the point where we go from definite to indefinite, and that tells us that it's both a sentence and that's where the is, am, or are would go. So the new student, what about him? He's a smart guy. We don't have an is or an a. This just reads the student, the new guy, smart, which if you're very, very new to Arabic can be a little bit confusing, especially when we get into definite words that don't have alif lam on them. But if you keep your head about you, you can just go through the sentence and say, does it go from definite to indefinite? Yes, it does, and it's right here, and that's where our is or am or are is going to go. So in English, we'd say the new student is a smart guy with a period and a capital letter. نفس الشيء هنا, same thing over here. الطالبة الجديدة فتاة ذكية. So this is exactly the same thing, only with the gender swapped. So the new student, there's no is, there's no a fatat, I've got it as gal here, which is cheesy and old school, but I needed a short word for it. Young woman just took up too much space. So fatat dhakia, a smart young woman, a smart gal. Again, no is, no a in this sentence. You have to infer that it's there based on the fact that we have gone from definite to indefinite. Once you do this about 100 times, it won't be a problem at all for you. You'll be readily able to pick out the difference between sentences and phrases. But a lot of times this is taught in such a way that, oh, you're going to pick it up. And not every native speaker of English does pick this up really quickly, which is why I'm going to massively belabor the point here for a while until you really see it over the course of 6 videos. When evaluating these strings of words, keep in mind that pronouns and what we call demonstratives, hadha and hadhihi and dhalik and tilka, this, that, these, and those, all count as definite for this purpose. So do question words. So I can say, hadha shabba dhaki, and this word here is definite because it's a this, that, these, and those, a demonstrative, an ism ishara in Arabic, an indicator word. And then these two are definite بسبب ألف لام. And then طالب جديد are both غير معرف or indefinite. So here's the point where we go from definite to indefinite, and that's where our is, or that's what tells us it's a sentence, and where our is, am, or are is going to go. So هذا الشاب ذكي, that this smart guy, what about him? He is a, and we don't have an is or an a, new student. So again, it's not rocket science. It just doesn't really work like English does. English will help you out a little bit more and then cake you around into the back alley and beat the hell out of you by spelling things funny. Arabic won't do that. So تلك الفتاة الذكية, so that smart gal, definite, definite, definite. This is definite because it's a demonstrative. These two are definite بسبب ألف لام. And then here we get to غير معرف, indefinite, طالبة جديدة. So these two sentences are the same thing, except here it's a woman rather than a man, and I'm saying that instead of this. But grammatically, it amounts to the same thing. There is a point at which we go from definite to indefinite. That is the point that tells us that this is a sentence rather than a phrase, and that is where the is, am, or are is going to go. Take a look at a couple of other examples. Here I'm using human plurals, and in the lesson about human plurals, I was in such a hurry to get to lunchtime that I didn't give you the words for these and those for human plural. So here they are. They're both mouthfuls. So هؤلاء, I've put it in blue for you so you could see it here. هؤلاء is the word for these when referring to people. And it doesn't matter what gender they are. It's going to be هؤلاء is these for people. So هؤلاء is shabab, these guys. And then طلاب is the plural of طالب. And then جدد is the irregular plural of جديد. If you said طلاب جديدون, everyone would understand you. And several people wouldn't even notice. But this one is a demonstrative, an ism ishara, so it's mu'arraf or definite. This one is mu'arraf bisabab alif lam. And then we have غير mu'arraf here, indefinite. So right here is our point where we go from definite to indefinite, and that makes it a sentence. So then you can parse the words. These, human plural, young people, students, new, or these folks, these guys are new students. There's no are in this word, in this sentence, rather. The human plural for those is a mouthful, أولئك. So أولئك is how you say it. When I annotate these PDFs, I'll put the transliteration in because it's not obvious how to pronounce them from the way they're spelled. So أولئك الفتيات, those young women, those gals, and then we change to indefinite. This one is definite because it's a demonstrative. This one is definite because of alif lam. And then we get to غير mu'arraf, indefinite. طالبات, جديدات. Remember, groups made up entirely of human women have the at plural, the jam mu'annath salim, the safe human plural, the safe feminine plural, excuse me. So those gals, what about them? Are new students. Again, there's no are here. Take a look at another set of examples. We can use pronouns here. Remember that hal is our question word for yes-no question. And then anta is you, masculine singular. So hal is a question word. Anta is a pronoun, so it's definite. And then طالب جديد is indefinite. So right here is where we're going to put the line and make this a sentence. And a question fundamentally is always a sentence, so you needn't really worry about that here. But yes, no question, you, student, new, and you're asking, are you a new student? There's no are here. Hiya can mean she, it can mean it can mean non-human they, but since we have taliba here, we know it means she. So hiya, because it's a domir or pronoun, is mu'arraf or definite. And then these two words are غير mu'arraf or indefinite. So our line would go here, and we would say she, what about her? Is, no is, a new student, no a either. So once you get the hang of this, it's not that difficult, but it's a little bit tough to remember at first with no capital letters and no helping letters that this word, because it's a pronoun, counts as definite, and that means combined with these two indefinite words tells us it's a sentence. So we can put the is, am, or are there. So she is a new student. In English, we have 5 words, a capital letter, and a period. In Arabic, we have 3 words and no capital letters. We can say nahnu. Nahnu is we, almost universally pronounced hana. So nahnu is how we say it in Fusha or formal Arabic. And then tulab judud is the human plural of talib jadid. So we are new students. Again, there's no are here. So through the course of the rest of these videos, I'm going to take this very, very basic theme and elaborate on it greatly. Where we go from definite to indefinite, that tells us it's a sentence, and that's where the is, am, or are goes. But I want to do one last thing here because it's counterintuitive to an English speaker. So the pattern for this thing versus this is a thing is counterintuitive. You want to read it backwards if you're an English speaker. I'll give you an example in a moment. You could see it. So just memorize this pattern. I'll give it to you right here in a second. And then I'll get to this at the end. To say this is the thing, we're going to stick a pronoun in there. And let me do it through examples instead. So I can say هذا البيت. So هذا البيت. This word is definite because it's a demonstrative. And this word is definite بسبب ألف لام. So this is a phrase, not a sentence. If you're an English speaker, you want to look at it and say, this is the house. But it's not. It's this house. This is a phrase, not a sentence. That's how it's counterintuitive and why it's just you're just best off memorizing the pattern. And again, once you do it like 50 or 100 times, it will become second nature and it won't bother you anymore. Same thing if we have a feminine singular noun. So هذه الغرفة, not هذه الغرفة, but هذه الغرفة. So definite because it's a demonstrative, definite because of alif lam. Therefore, it's an ism sifa or phrase, not a jumla or sentence. And this means this room. And then again, non-human plural is feminine singular. So هذا البيت, this house, becomes هذه البيوت, these houses. We have to, because houses are not people, we have to call them she when they're plural, not he or they. So هذه البيوت, these houses. If we take off the alif lams, well, now they become sentences. So هذا بيت, this one is definite because it's a demonstrative. This one is غير مؤرف or indefinite. So this is a sentence is what this means. We put our blue bar here and we're going to say this is a house. There's no is, there's no a. So you could see the potential for confusion here because this one looks like it means this is the house. And this one probably looks like it means this house, but it's backwards. So please pay careful attention to this because it's a critical part of basic Arabic. Just memorize the pattern. I'm explaining to you why it works this way, but you're better off just memorizing the pattern. So هذه غرفة, again, definite because it's a demonstrative, indefinite. Therefore, it's a jumla or sentence, and here's where the is, am, are goes. So this is a room. No is, no a. هذه بيوت. Same thing. Because buyut is non-human plural, it's feminine singular, so we use a feminine demonstrative. So because it's a demonstrative, it's definite. Here we have indefinite. That makes it a sentence, and that's where the is, am, or are goes. So these are houses. I would add adjectives to this, but I ran out of space, and in future videos I'll give more elaborate examples of exactly this. So, if we want to say this is the thing, we have to add a pronoun in between them. So هذا البيت is this house, but هذا هو البيت is this is the house. What we're really saying here is this is it, comma, the house. So I have put the pronoun in blue to make it clear. In Arabic, this is called domir al-fasl, the pronoun of separation. And one of these days, I'm going to get off my butt and write a grammatical romance novel, and that's what I'm going to call it. So هذا هو البيت. This is it, the house. هذه هي الغرفة. This is it, only it's feminine it here, the room, because we don't actually have an it. And then هذه هي البيوت. In Arabic, we have to say this is her, the houses. In English, we'd say this is them, the houses, or these are them, the houses, or these are the houses. So I'll put the translation here so that you can see it. I would highly, highly urge you to just go and memorize this pattern because it's counterintuitive to you as an English speaker, and you're better off just learning it this way. Usually I don't advocate for rote memorization, but this is definitely one thing where it's so counterintuitive that it's worth doing. So in subsequent videos, I will talk about the beginning halves of sentences. I will talk about the end halves of sentences. I will talk about prepositions. I will talk about how we use prepositions to say to have, which is not a verb in Arabic. And then I'll talk about how to negate them. But for now, I'm going to say, ma